Lyn, what motivates your activism?
Well, of course, I'm fueled by mother love. I love my son very much and cherish him, and feel like what's happened to him is very unfair, and he doesn't belong in prison, and he has a lot to contribute. And so I'm very committed to him. I'm committed to Ross. But since I've gotten involved in this and seen up close and personal how the government operates, I see it as a bigger fight as well. I really do. And I feel like we are in very important times. I feel like we're at a crossroads in history right now. You know, we've left the 20th century, we're careening into the 21st century and the digital age. And I think the government is expanding very rapidly as well. And I'm concerned for our freedoms. And I think it's very important for people to step up now and address this issue. And so that motivates me as well.
What's the summary of Ross's story that people should know today and into the future for history?
That's a big question. Um, Ross started and created the Silk Road website to give people an experience of the free market, open marketplace without government interference, a truly free market with some restrictions of things that would harm people, like child pornography and assassinations and stolen property, but basically a free market. And the judge in the case did not believe that that was his motivation, but I know it was his motivation because he and I talked about it and our family members for years before Silk Road. He just became very passionate about this idea, and he actually designed a video game that would give people this experience, and tried to get that published and taken on by a company, and that didn't happen. He lectured at the University of Texas on it. He and other meetups around the Austin. He was thinking about doing a YouTube course on it. So he's trying to think of various ways that he could reach out to people and have them see what a free market could be. And that, to me, Ross is about freedom and about liberty, and he is committed to that, and he's passionate about it. And the portrayal of him as some kind of kingpin, motivated by money, thug who just cares about expanding his kingdom and making tons of money is so totally opposite of who Ross is. And that was fairly evident from his lifestyle. He doesn't really, he cares about making a contribution to the world. And so he had an idea, and now he has been um, sentenced to life in prison without parole for all nonviolent charges. He's a totally nonviolent person who's never had any priors. And it's for things that he actually didn't actually do himself, but that others did on a website that he is alleged to have created. Well, he definitely has created. He said that, and to have operated. And it's just stunning that anyone would be given this sentence. It is a harsher sentence than most murderers or many murderers get. Rapists, kidnappers, child pornographers. It's a harsher sentence than people like that get. It is a harsher sentence than Charles Manson got, because Manson, being in the state system, is eligible for parole. Ross in the federal system is not. So he's virtually buried alive until he dies for something he created when he was 26 years old. And well, we're going to do our best to not have that be the final part of the story.
So he has an unprecedented sentence. The
Yes.
accusations are actually things that our government is guilty of and that they're putting on him. I've seen the evidence. I'm a forensic historian. I can tell you that those accusations can hold just as directly to the government, even if Ross was guilty of those things, which he's not. Um, he was doing this because we don't have a free market. I think that's what people don't understand. They think we live in a free market. I looked up the definition of free trade one time, and it started telling me about the opium system that the British East India Company was running, and this is the origin of free trade, forcing drugs on populations. So, what did the government actually charge him with?
Well, and what's interesting is the charges originally and what he was convicted for didn't end up being exactly what he was sentenced for, because the government tends to pile on charges, redundant charges for the same action, to make things sound even worse than they are, prejudice a jury, intimidate people into pleading. You know, you can do one thing and be charged all these different ways. And that's what they did. But by the time it got around to sentencing, they vacated a couple of them. So ultimately, he was charged with trafficking controlled substances on the internet, life in sentence without parole for that. And again, it wasn't that they said he actually did it. The second charge for life without parole was the kingpin charge, it's known as, or the continuing criminal enterprise. The problem with that was that statute requires that the kingpin organizes, manages, and supervises 5 specific people. There was no evidence at trial presented to name these people, or that they even determined that there were 5 people. And yet, he was sentenced to life without parole based on a statute that wasn't even satisfied. You know, a lot of our laws require specificity, because it is so easy to say vague things, and it's hard to defend against that. And in this, for that charge, which was a very serious charge, they weren't specific, even though it was required. And then, just for, you know, cherry on the top, we have, let's see, conspiracy to launder money. I think that was 20 years. Conspiracy or something like that to sell false IDs on the internet, because people were selling false IDs on Silk Road. And then finally, that was 15 years. And then finally, a 5-year sentence for hacking or aiding and abetting hacking. And they never accused Ross of actually hacking. It was because some people sold software on Silk Road that might be used for hacking.
So because people were engaged in the activities of the free market, they wanted to have a whipping boy or hang Ross out to dry, use him as an example to discourage other people from trying to explore free market. I also noticed this word conspiracy that kept showing up in the charges. So the government obviously believes in conspiracies, that 2 people would get together and try to break the law. Did you find that you also described how they moved the goalposts, that the charges started here and that they were ambiguous and they left themselves room to move? Why would the government have to play like that if what Ross did was so apparently wrong?
Good question. They use a lot of trial tactics that make me wonder, why do you have to do this if your case is so strong? One of them also was to bring up uncharged crimes, things he was not charged with or convicted for, specifically that murder for hire charge that was so damaging to his reputation, to his image, but that they never charged him for, or obviously, or convicted him for. They used it to deprive him of bail by saying he was dangerous and relying on that. They used it to deprive the defense of the witness list until a couple of days before trial, which is usually you get it weeks before, to allow you to prepare a powerful cross-examination. They didn't have that chance. They used it in trial, of course.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they said to the jury, "Oh, by the way, we're not charging him for this or anything," but, and then went on for a day talking about it, which of course is going to prejudice the jury. Of course it's going to poison the atmosphere, and they're going to believe that, details. He wasn't charged with it, but they're talking about it. It must be true. And finally, they relied very heavily on it at sentencing. The judge did, to justify this outrageous sentence, even though he was not charged or convicted for it. Now, I thought a sentencing was about addressing your convictions that a jury voted on in a trial. But she brought in that same uncharged crime, and so that's an example of one of the trial tactics. The conspiracies, what I've told is, it's not hard to be in a conspiracy. You can have a very tangential relationship to something, and they go, "You're in the conspiracy." And they've really stretched that meaning of conspiracy, which is disturbing, because the wider that umbrella is for criminal liability, and they've done it in many ways through this trial and through this case, well, we're all in more danger of being criminals, aren't we?
Have you been harassed during this entire time? Have people giving you negative pressure because they believe the sound bites about Ross and you're just wrong and they don't need to look at the information?
I have a little. I have, and what's most frustrating is when people send me an email and say, "You said this, you said that," and I didn't, or whatever, and I answer, and it's a hit and run email. They give me a fake email address. I don't even get to answer them. And I, just want to have a discussion, and they'll just send me something and I can't even respond. I have, but the overwhelming amount of communication has been positive. And I've gotten a little more hardened about it. At first, I'd be very, very upset, and it's no fun. I mean, it is upsetting, But at the same time, um, I'm like, well, there's so much more positive, and that's what I'm going to focus on. And get a life. Hello, if that's what you do with your time is to harass somebody's mother who's trying to, and maybe just listen to what I'm saying, because I really have said over and over, I'm not here to defend, certainly not drug use, Silk Road even. It's like I'm really want to focus on some of these larger issues that I think all the sensationalism is distracting from. While we're over here looking at murder for hire and drugs and all this stuff in Silk Road, and it does have some unsavory, dark aspects. So does the internet itself. While over here, there's precedent being set, quietly being set, and issues that really aren't getting very much attention that are going to impact all of us. And Paul Joseph Watson, he said they're using this case as a Trojan horse to kind of, sneak in things that'll affect internet freedom. And but it's very distracting, all this other stuff.
Well, and they want people to be distracted away from the fact that the drug war in the first place creates the black markets, and it's all part of free trade.
There's that, the whole drug war thing, yeah.
Right. So individuals are just trying to meet their needs. If there's a market that supports that, of course they're going to use it, and of course people are going to do whatever they do. And Ross doesn't have responsibility over anyone except himself. And for the government to act otherwise, to say that he's responsible for how people use it, is like saying that Craig Newmark is responsible for every fraud on Craigslist.
Right. It's really the theory of what they call transferred intent, which is making one person responsible for the actions of another person. And so in this case, it's a website host. They also did it to FedEx. They've indicted FedEx for drug trafficking and money laundering because people used FedEx to transport illegal pharmaceuticals. This, again, expands that criminal liability to include more of us. So more people are vulnerable to being criminals with transferred intent. And, it can expand to, okay, a website. There's stuff going on websites. And what about hate speech? What about, there's all kinds of liabilities that hosts are going to be vulnerable to. It's an important question. And also people are there voluntarily. That's right. And, yeah. So.
When I interviewed Bill Binney, he told us about parallel construction and the creation of cases against individuals who they wanted to not be so effective in their actions. Did you sense any parallel construction of Ross's case?
Well, our lawyers brought that up because, and one place that seemed like there's a big unanswered question is how did they find the server? And the explanation, the declaration under oath by Christopher Tarbell was just debunked worldwide. Experts all over the world said it was impossible, gibberish, a lie, inconsistent with reality. He was just widely debunked. And he goes, well, sorry, I didn't save my work, so I can't really respond. Like, okay, that's convenient. And so what was, so that raises a lot of doubt about how they actually found the server. And then you think, well, could that have been the NSA that found the server? It's a question that's not answered. And actually, they never really said it wasn't in their papers. They kind of jeered and made fun of the defense for suggesting it, but they never actually said it wasn't that I know of. And so it is a big question. And of course, we know they do it. And we know that the NSA gives the DEA information, who supplies law enforcement with the information, and they make up a whole other scenario to cover up what really happened. And that particular thing about the server, to me, raises a lot of questions about that.
That's a real red flag when they offer evidence and they don't have it themselves.
Right, and then under oath claim something that everyone says, it didn't even jive with the FBI's own evidence, what he said. But apparently it satisfied the judge. She didn't seem to have a problem with it.
Then there were 2 FBI agents that had administrative access for 2 years to the Silk Road. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, just to be precise.
Yes.
I believe they had, they were working undercover on Silk Road for 2 years. I believe they gained the access when Curtis Green was arrested in January of 13. So I don't know that they had the keys to the kingdom for 2 years, but they had it for almost a year. They had plenty of time. They were very, very well versed in computer technology. One was an expert in it, and the other was good at it. And they used their access to steal almost $1 million. But they also did have high-level administrative access to the site. They could change passwords, reset PIN numbers. They could commandeer accounts. They had the ability to take over DPR's account and other accounts. They could write messages, private messages. They could post things on the marketplace and on the forum. You know, they could change or create private messages. They had access to bank accounts. I mean, keys, on and on and on. Basically, they could do pretty much anything. And these are two corrupt agents. And I can say that now without using alleged because they've pled guilty, which it reinforces the fact that, yes, the corruption was occurring. And how can anyone say that doesn't taint the evidence? How can we rely on this evidence? And yet, it wasn't allowed to be known to the jury. It was totally precluded from the trial, which to me is the real scandal. They knew all about it. They were investigating these agents. And they gave the excuse that, well, that'll jeopardize our investigation. We can't let it be known. So the defense said, okay, we'll wait. We'll put off the trial a couple months, finish up your investigation. Oh, no, the schedule and, right to a speedy trial or something. And the defense is like, no, this should be known. And the judge ruled in their favor. And the jury never knew about it. And then 2.5 months later, it all comes out. And what came out was it wouldn't have jeopardized anything because those agents were well aware that they were under investigation. They had already been interviewed by law enforcement.
When, where, and how was Ross arrested?
He was arrested October 1st, 2013 in San Francisco in the Glen Park Library. He was actually downloading the Colbert Report on an open source network in that library and got a message from, according to the trial, from an undercover agent, Jared Yagan, who went by the name on Silk Road as Cirrus, asking him to get on, log on to Silk Road. And then once they got him to do that, they arrested him.
Why did they have to put him in that situation to arrest him? I mean, with Bill Binney, they just bust down the door and go in and get him in the shower. Why did they have to have Ross do that?
I assume because they wanted that laptop open, and so they wanted to get him logged in and then grab it while it was open.
Do you consider that entrapment?
I asked about that. I think, I wonder about that. They got, and when I read about it, they go, he's caught with his fingers on the keyboard. Yeah, but he was asked to log on. And he didn't necessarily have to be the current DPR to know how to log on. And he was downloading the Colbert Report. So I don't know legally if it's entrapment, but it's certainly, they were involved in his getting on there. I don't know.
Was he arrested by the FBI?
Well, Christopher Tarbell, who is the one who had the declaration about how he found the server, he was the head of the arrest team, and he is FBI. But this Jared Yagan, who's the one who asked him to log on, was Department of Homeland Security. So I guess it was a whole group of law enforcement. The interesting thing about Tarbell is he also signed the criminal complaint. He was the head of the investigation, all that stuff. He didn't show up at trial. It was like he didn't exist. They barely mentioned him. So of course then he wouldn't be subjected to cross-examination about the server or anything else. It's like he was erased.
The FBI, there was recently a book called Terror Storm, Inside the FBI's Manufactured War on Terror. And this author and investigative journalist, Trevor Aronson, goes through 22 case studies of post-9/11 terrorism that they supposedly protect us from. And in 14 out of those 22 cases, it was proven that those were created by the FBI, enticed, entrapped, however you want, artificially created terrorism. So I just can't help but notice a pattern that they don't need Ross to be a criminal to put him in prison for the rest of his life.
Yeah. I would, some of this corrupt agent stuff, material, is still sealed. Mm-hmm. We have no idea what the extent of it is. And I'm wondering, well, they've already pled guilty. It's over. Why is it still sealed? Right. What are you hiding? And so I feel like the jury and the media and was just presented with a very carefully controlled narrative.
Mhm.
And they can do that, from what I can see, they can do that to anybody. And one of the precedents that was set in this case that is, I think, dangerous is that the standard of evidence has been drastically lowered because it's digital. It's screenshots, emails, chats, and whether or not you believe what they put up on that screen in Ross's trial is kind of a side point, because it doesn't take a lot of imagination to think, well, it's easily created and you cannot prove who created it or anything. And it was relied on for at least, well, most of their evidence. And a mortgage company will not accept a screenshot of a bank statement because it's so easily faked. Other courts have thrown out screenshots for that reason, but Catherine Forrest accepted it full out. And it raises the question, like your question, they don't need someone to be a criminal. It's potentially, I'm not saying they did this, but it's potentially true, and that it can be done, that you can just create digital evidence very easily.
Where are the investigative journalists who are supposed to vet this information?
Good question. I think some are more independent like that than others. A lot of them, I think, pretty much regurgitate what the government gives them.
I think part of the dynamic we're sensing is that the audience no longer demands facts, and that we're bombarded by so much media, no one ever has time to go fact check. So if you read a good summary of a story, you want to be informed, you think you know about it without really doing any looking for yourself. And instead of pushing us to learn more about these things through leading us through investigative journalism, I think they've just given up, and they're just, putting some stuff on site because they know they need continuous content and clicks, and it's no longer about actually getting to the truth or informing us so that we can make, good judgments for our friends and family and for ourselves.
Well, let me just say one thing about that.
Yeah.
One of the journalists who I consider more, he gets under things and he goes after things. He actually said he had access to some material and he was afraid to use that password and go in there because of what happened to Barrett Brown.
Right.
He was afraid to, and that would have been juicy stuff, right? He said, I can't do it. So there's a chill on investigation as well, because Barrett Brown's in prison and he doesn't want to go to prison. So there's that aspect too. You probably know more about him than I do.
Well, so a journalist digging into cases is then basically
But I think he was just sharing links, wasn't he?
Right, given the same treatment as terrorists. They're looking at these people who are trying to uncover truth and actually demonstrate it in a world where they control most of the media, and they can provide us with very selective perspectives, and most people don't notice it. Barrett Brown was one of the people, I think, trying to make people say, he's just a mirror. He's saying, if I put the mirror over here, you can see around this corner and see what's going on over here. And they tried to break that mirror.
A lot of our very bright, young, idealistic people are being put in cages right now. And it's appalling. And actually, I've come after visiting the prison, getting to know the families, listening to Ross about the people in there. I've come to think that nonviolent people don't belong in prison. If they have something they have to pay back or do, we have ankle bracelets, we have home arrest, but our prisons are bursting at the seams with nonviolent people like Ross because of the drug war. And it's costing us a fortune, billions of dollars, destroying people's lives, and it's not stopping anyone from using drugs.
But it's very profitable.
It's very profitable. I mean, it's a success in many ways.
Right.
But, I get it. But it's just outrageous. It's
it's
terrible. This is America. We have a constitution. We're supposed to be free. We're supposed to be the beacon of freedom. And we've become this, state of imprisonment. I mean, really, with more people in prison than anybody else in the world, including totalitarian states?
No victim, no crime.
And you mentioned something yesterday. Well, a lot of things that I wrote down, but the figure of 80,000 people
in solitary
confinement.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the way that your son has been treated in prison, and how is your son doing in prison, and what activities is he engaged in?
Okay. Well, as I was talking about yesterday, he was put in solitary for 6 weeks. And, come on. Solitary, I think, is very overused. Obviously, it's torture. And as I said yesterday, there's 80,000 people in solitary in this country. And when I read that some of them have been in there for years or even decades, I was horrified. It's horrible. Now, Ross is in the general population now. Um, Ross gets along with people. He's very friendly. He likes people, and I would say he's done well. In terms he helps people. He's, taught classes. He'll tutor. I mean, after trial, which was exhausting, he'd come back to his cell and tutor his what they call bunkie for his GED. He's just and a few of them wrote letters on his behalf to the sentencing judge because he'd made such a difference in their lives, and they were just so inspired by him. So he's doing well that way. I mean, I'm really very proud of how he's doing. I talk to him on the phone sometimes. I'm like, God, I'm just so impressed with him saying positive and just, you could kind of tell from that letter,
Yes.
That
letter brought me to tears.
Yeah.
You brought me to tears several times yesterday, but the letter really put me over the edge.
Yeah. But,
and especially when you were talking about how he's teaching other, and then you bumped into one of his, someone that yesterday, right?
Yeah. And he looked him up because he was there, and he said what a great guy he is, and given me money for and another guy who was an inmate with him is in touch with me. He's just a very inspiring person, but he also cares about people. He's really a nice person. He's very sweet, and so to see him portrayed as this heartless thug and sociopath, I'm like, hey, there's all these armchair psychologists out there. But anyway, it's crazy. It's so weird. But I was going to say, as far as how it goes in there, the prisons are a very dense bureaucracy. So it's kind of like the DMV on steroids. It's really bureaucratic. And there's some people who have power that really shouldn't have power, that abuse it. There's also some really decent people that run it. So it's like a mix, just like anywhere. And so we've had some very bad treatment, very abusive treatment, but also very nice people who've helped out and who. So it's not a fun thing. You wouldn't go to the prison for recreation. It's not a fun experience, but and it's very heartbreaking because you see these children whose fathers are in there. They're clinging to them for just for that hour. The parents of these people, the spouses. It's just and these are nonviolent people. I get violent. That people have to be protected from them. These are nonviolent people. I'm in the room with them. They're all fine. We're all just like families, just trying to soak each other up for a few minutes. I really believe we can come up with a more creative, constructive solution to nonviolent offenders than what they're doing now.
I just one other question. You mentioned, and you talked at length about this yesterday, about the controlled narrative of the trial. And I was shocked to find out, given the charges, that you were denied certain expert witnesses.
Yeah.
And that certain things that were relevant, say on a Friday, suddenly over the weekend, come Monday, the judge is telling you, no, this is irrelevant and we're going to move on. Could you maybe talk a little bit about that aspect of the trial?
Yeah. Well, a lot of that came from the example I gave yesterday was the third day of trial. DHS agent Jared Yergin was cross-examined by Ross's attorney, Joshua Draytell. And did you want me to go into the whole thing?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Sure. And what came out of that, just sort of briefly, is that Yergin had been undercover for 2 years, thousands of hours on the site. And he actually said he believed there were more than one DPR. But he was honing in on one of them, Mark Karpeles. That is what he said in trial. I'm not accusing Mark of anything. I just want to be clear about that. It's what was in trial. And he said in 2 signed affidavits, sworn affidavits, that he had probable cause to suspect him, to think he was DPR, and to get a warrant for his Gmail account. And asked other agencies, don't tip him off. I'm honing in on this guy. And then DHS Baltimore, Maryland, the site of the extensive corruption, those agents came out of that same place, did tip Karpeles off and seized over $1 million from his account. The next thing we hear, the Karpeles' lawyer has approached DHS Baltimore and said, hey, we got a deal for you. You back off our client Karpeles and we'll give you a name. We'll give you DPR. Mm-hmm. And the next thing we hear from the witness was that 2 weeks later, Ross was arrested and Karpeles has never been charged. At that point, the prosecution leaped up, objection, this line of questioning is going to stop. They're trying to say somebody else's DPR. This isn't going to happen. And the judge was like, well, yeah, that's what you do. That is valid. And he kept arguing, and she decided to cut off the cross-examination. Josh had about another hour at least to go. Send the jury home early and discuss this. And she said, you know, if he had probable cause to believe Mark Karpeles was DPR, it's relevant. And she went on to list other things that were highly relevant, obviously relevant. And she said, look, the cat's out of the bag. Karpeles is possible DPR. And that was on Thursday. By the next Tuesday, the court ruled, no, actually, forget what we said then. It's not relevant. None of it's relevant. And in fact, the jury needs to forget they heard any of it. And the prosecution gets a mulligan. I'm going to tag what should have been objected to, and so we can retroactively sustain it. And by the way, we're going to put you on a very tight leash as far as what you can ask. And then the judge went down a list, you know, for instance, the question, did you believe Mark Karpeles was DPR? That was off limits. And it was a whole list of, you know, did you think he ran Silk Road? Off limits. And it was a whole list of what was off limits, to be forgotten. And basically, and that deal with the lawyer offering a name in exchange for backing off, that's not relevant. And from then on, and the chart really shows very dramatically the contrast. And from then on, as our lawyer put, his defense was eviscerated. He wasn't allowed to cross-examine effectively. And Forbes wrote about it and said it was completely derailed. And then following that, as you said, witnesses were not allowed to testify. It was a Bitcoin witness, Andreas Antonopoulos, was not allowed to testify to challenge the Bitcoin testimony of the government, which, by the way, paid $55,000 for that testimony. Boy, I'd like to have that kind of money for this case. And they have unlimited money, apparently. And Roger Ver said, they either don't understand how it works, that Bitcoin works, or they're lying about it. And we weren't permitted to challenge that and explain that to the jury because one of the reasons, the jury understands Bitcoin just fine. That's irrelevant. That's unnecessary. And the jury is like, you know, really? You know, I mean, Bitcoin's complicated. They did not understand Bitcoin. And then we tried to bring the defense did a computer expert, because there were a lot of questions about the integrity and competence of the laptop investigation. Multi-agencies had it. It crashed in the middle. There was all kinds of questions about they didn't follow guidelines, you know. And this expert could have explained that. He could have explained the how hidden websites, the technology behind it, makes it very difficult to prove anything. He wasn't allowed to testify because one of the reasons, this case doesn't require special technical knowledge. Well, if this case doesn't, I don't know what case does. And, you know, only 2 of these jurors were under 40 years old. I really think, I mean, a lot of it was over my head. I'm sure a lot of it was, you know, hard to understand. It was very dense.
The other thing I wanted to have you just touch on is you said something else yesterday that I did not know about, and frankly, it shocked me, but I don't know why at this point. A U.S. senator trampled over a basic tenet of the justice system: innocent until proven guilty. Can you tell? It was Schumer, but can you tell us? Can you mention what he said? And yeah,
I'm happy to.
Great.
This has basically been called Chuck Schumer's case. He called for the closing of the site in June of 11. Although, interestingly, when they seized the server and could have closed it and supposedly stopped it from, as he said, doing more damage, they kept it open for business for 4 more months. But in any case, Ross was arrested in California, but he was tried in Schumer State. The lead prosecutor over the whole thing is Preet Bharara. He was Schumer's special counsel for a couple of decades. And the presiding judge, Catherine Forrest, was recommended by Schumer for her position. So there was a lot of Schumer in this case. And he did. He, before trial, before any evidence, came out publicly in a letter to Eric Holder, to the Justice Department, and said, congratulations, DOJ, you got your man. And I was shocked. I was like, wait, innocent till proven guilty. Hello. A U.S. senator is just completely trampling on that very basic tenet of our justice system, presumption of innocence. This was a presumption of guilt that was publicly made by a United States senator in the state where Ross was to be tried. I mean, how can you have a fair trial?
I think it says a lot that they had to give you an unfair trial, that they had to rig it, that they had to pull every mechanism that they could to make sure it looks their way, you know. And
I agree.
How do you feel about that?
I think that it is very dangerous. I think that our right to a fair trial is a foundation of our liberty. And that if we don't have fair trials in this country, we are all in very, very big trouble. And frankly, I was appalled and shocked. I really was shocked. And but I think our our trials and the right to a fair trial is in peril. And I think it's dangerous.
Before Ross was arrested, did you rely on corporate media for your news and information?
No, I was better read than that.
How were you disappointed by the corporate media's treatment of the case?
I feel like a lot of times it's rather shallow. I think that they tend to repeat each other, so it's kind of an echo chamber, and don't go beneath the surface, and pretty much take what is put out by the government and go for the most sensationalistic things, and not really look at, and it's not all of them, to be fair. Some of them really do look at bigger issues, but a lot of it is sensationalism, and I guess that's what gets more hits on their site or whatever, but it's disturbing because now I read things, I'm like, well, I don't really believe that because I know what happens. The things are distorted, misquoted, taken out of context, repeated. Things are repeated that aren't true. And it's more almost like entertainment instead of really being informative. And so it's been, I think it's disturbing because I think a lot of people do take for granted that it's true.
I heard Alex Winter talk about his documentary. What was your role in participating in that, and what do you think of it?
Well, about 5 people came to us wanting us to be in their documentaries, including Alex, and we said no to everybody. And then he was starting to be really supportive. He was retweeting me, and I'm like, oh, that's nice, and gave a donation. And I didn't realize it was him, and I'm thanking him, and he's like, oh, yeah, and he was supportive. And I thought, well, that got my attention a little bit. And then he said, let's just talk, and so we did. And he's very personable. And I asked Cody Wilson. I said, so what do you think? Do you think I should do this? And he said, yeah, he did a good job with the Napster thing. He'd probably be good. So I'm like, okay, I'll do an interview. And then once I met him, one thing led to another. It's kind of hard to say no to Alex. He's but in a very nice way. But he did a good job. I think he did do a good job. It wasn't an advocacy piece. I would have made an advocacy piece, but it wasn't an advocacy piece. But I think it was balanced, and it certainly gives people a much broader picture of the case, and who Ross is, and does bring up the fact that the trial was unfair. And I thought it's been really helpful. A lot of people have contacted us after seeing that movie because it does bring up a lot of questions. It's more asked questions than it does, this is what happened. And there are a lot of questions that are unanswered.
Right. And I think it's those unanswered questions that act as splinters in the mind, and eventually they get infected, and we start thinking about them, and then we reach out to the environment and see what information's available, and we start to answer our own questions. So I think it's the beginning of learning.
I agree.
If you present people with declarative sentences, then they're like, okay, I already got it. I don't need to think for myself. So I think Alex is really smart to use the question mark throughout and to provoke people. And when they leave, that's the beginning of them thinking about it, not the end.
Right. It's well put. It's okay.
Wasn't Ross's life sentence the 4th life sentence of this judge?
This year.
Oh, that's a good question.
This year.
Good job.
That's what our lawyers told me. Yeah.
Could you just say what they told you, just so it's not me saying it?
Sure. Our attorneys told us that this is the 4th life sentence that Judge Catherine Forrest has issued this year, 2015. And it's only June.
Yeah, I just thought that was an important point.
You mentioned Cody Wilson. How has he helped you out?
Well, I consider Cody a real freedom fighter. And, we're in Austin. So I met Cody, way back. And he was just said, I want to help you. And he's a wonderful person. 14th most dangerous man in the world, right? He's very, very nice person, very sweet, very good person, and and has a lot of integrity, and so he's just willing to, it's not like we're always in touch, but he has come through for me on different things, advice, support, lots of different things. He's donating to our fundraiser that's coming up. I mean, he's been a good friend.
What's your next move strategically to get your son out of prison?
Appeal. And my job, I see, is to get funding for the appeal, because it's very expensive to wage an appeal. And we can't pay for it ourselves. Our family's not wealthy. We don't have the means to pay for it ourselves. We've gotten a lot of great support, so that's been great. But we definitely need to keep raising money for this appeal. And I really want people to understand, it's not just for Ross. It really, there's precedents that are being set here that will impact everyone, and to have it turned over in appeal will reverse them. And it's also a pushback on the drug war. They have made Ross the poster boy of the drug war, and they've made this a drug war case. It's a huge battle in the drug war. And if people are against this drug war, which is such a disaster, this is a great way to push back. So we're filing for appeal, and then there's a whole process. And what I'm told is probably an appellate court will look at it next March. And Ross got to stay in New York, which we wanted, even though I hear that particular prison, the guy who I met at Porcfest said, "Oh, that place is horrible." But he wanted to stay because he wanted to participate in the appeal. And his lawyers are in New York, and he doesn't have email access. And so if he went somewhere else, he wouldn't be able to meet with them easily and communicate. So he's working on it too.
How would you dispel the belief that people think that Ross must be somehow a millionaire or billionaire because of his activities, so that they would understand why you're raising money?
Right. Well, he may have been. I know that he bought a lot of Bitcoin when it was very, very cheap, like pennies, but that's gone. It was auctioned. It's gone. We don't have access to any of that. We are not rich. Don't own Bitcoin. There is no hidden wallet, I promise. And so he's not rich. He actually has nothing. And so that's just the way it is.
How can people who want freedom for themselves as well as Ross help you out? Where do they go?
Yeah, FreeRossorg is our website, and I try to keep it full of information and as well, but there's a place to donate. But you can, if a lot of people donate a cup of coffee equivalent, that'll help a lot, So you can donate, and there's ways to communicate with me if you want to help or have ideas or get creative. It's, we really need help. There's a lot of young, brilliant people out there, and we could really use, and they don't have to be young, but there's a lot of young ones that we could really use help and support with.
Are you encouraged about the future of freedom in this country? And if so, why?
I would say I am hopeful, but I'm not optimistic. I really would. I do. Now, I've talked to a lot of people here that say, no, technology is going to be the answer. And I hope and pray that's true. I worry a little bit. I think we're really, again, at a crossroads. I think there are some serious things going on. I've read 1984. I don't think it should be taken lightly. And so I'm concerned. But I'm always hopeful. And that's how I feel.
All right, these are my last couple questions. This is to promote Porcfest for next year. How do you define freedom?
You just give me such easy questions. I don't want to control other people, and I don't want them controlling me. I feel like I know what's right for my life, and if I'm not hurting somebody else, I think it's my business. And I want other people to have that right too. That's how I see freedom. And Porcfest is what a great experience to be around people who are so liberty-minded and so freedom-oriented. It's wonderful.
What's your favorite part of Porcfest?
Definitely the people that I've met. I've just met such great people, interesting people from all over the world. Just so nice, so fun-loving. And I realize, freedom, that's what freedom brings. It brings joy and friendliness and openness and honesty, and it's just a wonderful atmosphere.
Yeah, I think freedom's a lifestyle. Why should folks at home consider coming to Porcfest 2016 or making it their family vacation?
Well, for all because of all the wonderful people and the stimulating conversations. And if you have children, it's like kid heaven. They can run around, and it's a beautiful setting, and it's great. It's a great combination of recreation outside and yet very stimulating intellectual conversations, great lectures and speeches, and it's very rich. It's a very rich environment, and I think it's just fabulous. It's a really unique kind of event. I don't know of any other event like it. And yeah, it's a very family friendly, and it's great for everybody.
All right, my last question. What would you like people in the future to know about this point in American history?
Well, as I said, I believe we're at a crossroads, and we have left the 20th century, and which is the one I've lived most of my life in. So I can really see the changes and how fast it's changing, and how different it is. And I feel like it could go either way. We're at this crossroads, and we can go towards more freedom and innovation and just all kinds of incredible things, or that same technology can be used to control people. It just can. And so we have some choices to make as a culture. And that's how I see it. I see it's very pivotal and transitional and important. It's a very important time. May you live in interesting times, right? It's a very interesting time.
Thank you, Lyn.
Sure.